And yeah, I'd love to chat with you afterwards about upcoming classes we have and other events that are coming up. But I just really appreciate that you chose to spend your Sunday with us. So thanks so much. I'm going to get us started here with a reading. We're going to go in alphabetical order by last name. So we're going to get started with a reading by Liz Bowen. Liz Bowen is a poet, scholar, and clinical ethicist based in the Center for Bioethics and Humanities at SUNY Upstate Medical University. She is associate editor of the Healing Muse and co-president of Health and Humanities Consortium. Liz is the author of 2 poetry collections, Sugarblood and Compassion Fountain. Let's give a round of applause to Liz Bowen.
Thanks so much, Tyler. Okay, I didn't know I was going first. I'm going to first read a couple of pieces from our 25th anniversary edition of the Healing Muse. And I believe that my colleague Deirdre is going to read a few more. So I'll read 2 short pieces and then something of my own, because even though we are celebrating the Healing Muse today, Deirdre has encouraged me to read my own work. So I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. This is a piece, a poem called Postnatal Psychosis by Laura Webb, which was the winner of one of our awards that we give out every year, the Hodge Award. Hospital, an icy pool that I slip into, spotlit. Pain on a loop, analyst scan, snip, stitch, apply policy, spoon tonics to lips. Lost pliant, I sip, I pass his cot. Halo, holy, halcyon, I sail on solo. No atlas, no captain, no coast scene. Pain on a loop. Oh, I can't say it. I can't attach. Play it cool. Act happy. Post pics. Stasis, apathy. This lost ship lists. I pass his cot. A plastic toy. A copy. A spy. Pain on a loop. China thin, I split. A typhoon hits. Can't sink. Chaos. Total panic. Piston slip. Stop. Oil spilt on coast. Halcyon lost. No pity. Only ash to ash to ash. I pass its cot. A poison. A past sin. An assassin. It's amazing, right? I love that poem. Yeah. Should I wait?
No, you're good.
Okay. Okay, and this is a poem called Enforced Error by Veronica Ashenhurst. This body derailed into exhaustion, but some routine blood work came back normal, so the doctor said I had wrong thoughts. It was fashionable then to declare that patients lay bedbound due to buried guilt or secret phobias. Medicine had left logic for sophistry, for an idea that patients hold illness beliefs causing symptoms. We suffered in that theory. It was a house of harm. True, I could mark other error in the history of science, as doctors once hastened death with bloodletting and came from autopsy room to patient ward, hands unwashed. But this is now. I have drowned these years of illness, drowned the girl I once was in a pool. Yet I long to force future's resistant door, to face the streets, a coin of light, and one gold day of time again. All right, so I'm just going to read a short excerpt of something I'm working on right now that I've never read or showed to anybody. So this is a special day. Yeah, so I'm mostly a poet, but this is a prose piece, kind of auto-fictional, and I will just say up front, it's about infertility and pregnancy loss. So just, yeah, know that. And it's also about the start of winter in Syracuse, so that deserves like a kind of trigger warning of its own. Okay. There had been a night when she thought she'd understood things. Severance was airing, and they had watched the episode that blew everyone's minds. The full episode flashback to Mark and Gemma's life together, the falling in love, the pregnancy, the miscarriage, the fertility treatments, the fighting, the distance, the anger, the resignation, the giving up, the fragility of the bond that had once been so strong in the face of so much loss and bodily alienation. When it ended, she and her husband sat in silence for an hour. She felt seen, though she felt a little weird about it, given that she hadn't yet had a miscarriage. But after that, she carried the episode in some easily reached pocket of her mind, so she could pull it into her memory whenever she felt particularly alone on her way to the fertility clinic. Even if no one in her life knew from experience how she felt, clearly there was someone out there who did, who happened to be writing episodes of Severance. Now when she thought back to that episode, there was a bitter taste in her mouth. She remembered the miscarriage scene and what it had led her to expect. There was the sudden, unexpected blood, the crying in the shower, and then a cut to the grief-fueled aftermath. The event of the miscarriage seemed to happen all at once, contained to a single moment in the bathroom. She remembered reading the Reddit threads when it aired, all the people who related specifically to the color of blood that dripped down Gemma's leg. But she had no such identification. Her loss had happened invisibly and with no end, dragged between countless rooms and days, from home to work to multiple doctors' offices. Eventually, she had blood like Gemma, sort of, but the arrival of blood was a relief, until it became a disappointment that she hadn't bled enough, could never bleed enough. She remembered the medical shows. Meredith Gray's crotch blooming red in the operating room. Heather Collins finding her underwear full of blood. It was always the same. A miscarriage is a horror of sudden discovery, and then it's over. On TV, they don't fail 2 rounds of misoprostol, have a D&C, and wait weeks for their beta-HCG to return to 0. There's no story in that, she thought. Or there could be a story, but it would have no meaning. After pouring herself a second cup of coffee, something she hadn't done since she'd learned she was pregnant, she held the mug up to her face to get a pic for the group chat. It was her favorite mug, the one that read, "Don't talk to me until I've had my abortion." "Hits different," she captioned the photo, feeling truly demonic. "OMFG," said the chat. The night before the surgery, she lay awake thinking about whether we could ever truly know that people don't experience surgery while it's happening. What if the effect of the anesthesia is not to eliminate the pain, but to prevent us from remembering it? What if in the real time of the surgery, we experience all the agony of what is being done to us, but when we wake up, we feel as if we'd been sleeping? What if some part of her would feel that and then disappear forever into a dark corner of her mind? Could it really fully disappear? Would it torment her for banishing it to the unconscious? Of course, she would never know. The surgery felt like nothing, less than a nap. As she was being wheeled into the operating room, the anesthesiologist had asked her what she did for work. She said she was an ethics consultant at the hospital across the street. He said, "Oh, ethics. In med school, they taught us that means we should act like we're sympathetic." She blacked out immediately, then came to just as immediately, but now with a heat pad on her stomach. The nurse asked if she felt nauseous or if she'd like something to eat. She demolished her 2 pieces of peanut butter toast and felt proud, as if she had climbed a mountain and told everyone she wasn't even sore. She stood up and walked steadily to the bathroom, thinking, "I don't even need these grippy socks." She told the nice nurse with the wheelchair that she didn't need to be wheeled down to her husband's car. She was perfectly capable of walking, and she was mildly annoyed when he told her to sit down anyway. She hopped into the car and said, "Let's go to the good bagel place," instead of the one that was on the way home. She was unashamed to be of the generation that always needed a little treat. Something stirred and then quieted inside her as she waited for her husband to emerge from the bagel shop. When they started driving, the pain was sudden and shocking. She thought this must be what contractions feel like, but then again, contractions come in waves. What was happening to her was only building, with no crest. She pictured her abdomen as a medieval hell mouth that, when entered, opened kaleidoscopically onto other hell mouths. She squeezed her seat and willed her seatbelt and willed herself to continue breathing. By the time they got to the house, she wasn't sure she could walk to the door, but somehow, through sheer force of will, she arrived at the couch. She writhed around, curling her legs up and then straightening them and then curling them up again, knowing no position would feel better than the one before it, but desperate to be wrong. Her husband asked her to name a number on the pain scale. She said 7. When it finally passed a few minutes later, he told her he'd been about to call 911 because he knew she always underestimated. The snow arrived so hard and fast she thought she'd brought it into being. It fell in powdery, violent waves. The wind wanted suffering. She gave it. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Liz. It's beautiful. Next, we're going to hear from Sandra Clark. She is a contributor here from Trillium, and we'll talk more about that program in a little bit. But she will be sharing a piece that she's been working on since 1999 and has edited in our group that meets at Trillium. So Sandra Clark is a New York State certified peer worker transferring from health service navigator, a position she has held for the past 10 years, to community health worker at Trillium Health. She's also a member of the Long-Term Survivor Legacy Writing Group. Welcome, Sandra.
Thank you. One thing I learned, even after cataract surgery, you still need glasses. I wrote this during the legacy writing. If I was to tell somebody before I leave this earth, to give them some advice, not just to friends and family, but to everyone. I want you to never forget to be happy. Through the bad times, tests, and trials, don't forget to be happy. Don't forget to smile. Life is a journey of negative and positive moments, and you get to choose whether you want to embrace the positive or negative that comes with your life journey. My advice to you is try to always find the positive within the negative. I've had a lot of negative in my life, from child abuse, from a mother who was abusive when she got drunk, the perfect mom when sober, that she made my favorite pineapple cake from scratch for my birthdays, to holding me between her beautiful, thick brown thighs to keep me warm in our cold apartment in winter, to giving me her blood so that I can live at the age of 3 years old when the doctors gave me up to die. She became my best friend in the end. I was used and abused by my first husband, who in turn produced inside my womb a smart and handsome son who loves me dearly. I must mention my oldest son and my only daughter because they too are the positives in my life journey. Their love for me is a triple positive in my life. I have dealt with homelessness, drug addiction, incarceration, and being suicidal because I didn't know or understand what it meant to love myself and be happy. Through it all, I have no regrets because I survived, and it brought me to Christ Jesus, who loves me for me, and his love for me taught me how to love myself and be happy. I have found peace within the storm that was my life for many years. But today I am strong, better, and wiser. When life challenges show up, and it will, when negatives attack the positive in life, and it will, make the choice to be happy, regardless of situation or circumstance, because you have strength within to weather life's storms and be happy in the end. God bless you.
Thank you, Sandra, for those words of encouragement. That was lovely. Next up, we're going to hear from Gaby. She is a psychiatric nurse practitioner, addiction specialist, writer, and visual artist who has recently returned to her hometown of Rochester, New York after 23 years in Vermont. She is widely published, and her artwork can be found in numerous collections, including the Smithsonian, Arizona State University, and RIT. She has been on faculty at the University of Rochester, St. John Fisher, and Norwich University. Gaby currently has a clinical practice in general adult psychiatry over telehealth for a primary care practice in Vermont and runs local workshops here in Rochester. She also helps run our beloved community writing group that meets free here every Saturday for an hour and a half to give our community the sense of writing fellowship with one another. And we really value the work she does there. So let's all give a round of applause to Gaby.
Thanks, Tyler. Writers and Books has been a pleasure to return to after all those years away. So, my piece was inspired by a quote from the formerly known as Banksy street artist, guerrilla artist, but we couldn't establish attribution clearly, so it wasn't used in the anthology. So it's in that anthology. And I want to do a special thank you to Donna Belusco, who I think is watching us. She's the editor of the anthology, and she asked me to have this piece included. It was over a year ago. It was a really dark time in my life. And sometimes you just need that little special push from somebody to say, would you put your piece in my book? So thanks, Donna. So the piece is called Yours, and it's inspired by the quote from the street artist formerly known as Banksy. And the epigraph is, they say you die twice. One time when you stop breathing, and the second time a bit later on when somebody says your name for the last time. Banksy. You carry the boxes out of your office while it's still light. A generic office in general psychiatric clinic where you have spent moments of such sheer immersion that often you blink hard into the sunset and end of day, unsure and breathless. Rifling through the papers, you realize these are papers from your last office, actually the one before that, which was the same facility you are now leaving again. You wonder why you aren't able to stay in one place, convinced it's your fault. But then you realize, no, it's the system and nothing is really going to improve, no matter where you are. The oriental rug and your mother's old lamps that spiff up the office spaces you are assigned, especially if you don't get the windows that you were promised, are packed in the trunk. There's a particular peachy salmon that you generally paint your walls, a color that picks up shades from the border in the rug. The color goes back 30 years or more now to your first office, a rich and lucky color, like a gemstone, maybe like hope. This time you weren't allowed to paint the walls of your office, and you didn't argue it, as if it was very clear that you wouldn't be staying. The next day you were unloading your car, having brought the boxes full of papers, too lazy and dispirited to go through them in the office. Most of them should have gone to the shredder. You start throwing papers into the wood stove. You make a separate pile with cards and notes from patients and from students. Your hand hovers between that pile and the fire. In the other room, there are boxes from another move. You toss cards into one of those boxes and shut the wood stove. You left all this stuff around instead of hiding it in the barn, out of sight, out of mind. What's wrong with you? Once you left a box under the piano for years, unsure how to let it go. From the bottom of the farthest box, you yank a manila envelope with an address from a police station in a distant state. The envelope looks old, the scuffed label handwritten, and you wonder how it got in the box from this office. You separate the frayed edges. Inside is a police report, and then you remember. The patient was referred by their workplace for an evaluation after getting drunk and threatening a coworker. We will call the patient Sal. We will not identify a race, a gender, or an age. We can use third-person pronouns. We will just say that the contents of the envelope is almost an inch thick and includes photographs. All this now would be digitalized, digitalized, its physicality shredded in that distant office in that distant state. You will now recall the night that you received it several offices ago. Sal had come in for a few appointments, and after establishing you as a safe person, more invested in Sal than Sal's employer, Sal told you about their mother's murder. For decades, Sal had kept the police report, but had never opened the envelope. Often, Sal would put the envelope on the nightstand of whatever dorm or shelter they were living in, alongside a pint of Jack Daniels. It made me feel like she was closer to me, and, well, you know. You do know, but now is not the time for that. Sal would never say exactly if they witnessed the murder, but over time, before the envelope arrived, you were able to glean enough detail to make the PTSD diagnosis anyway and offer appropriate medications, which were politely refused. Often Sal would miss appointments, and you sent your brief reports to the employer, hoping Sal could keep the job, stop drinking, and come back to see this through. Would you let me bring in that thing? Sal finally asked. Would you open the package? Would you read it? It seemed therapeutic, so you agree, thinking Sal wanted you to read it together. I've dealt with worse, you think, but barely. I have just one question, Sal asks of you. Sal's lively, dark eyes flatten, and you reach out with a steadying hand. You don't want to know the answer to this question, but you have already promised. So you schedule another appointment, you make a plan, together you'll move through this carefully. You know all about survivor guilt and trauma. You've been doing this for years. Sal dropped off the manila envelope at the reception desk and never came back. And now it's yours. As long as there are people like you, no one ever dies. And the envelope goes into a box, and the box goes into a pile, and the pile grows larger. And now you move it into the barn along with ratted prayer shawls and tiny bottles of dried up ink and drawings framed from another time, menorahs from another country, Scrabble tiles bounce along the floorboard, children's scribbles, costume jewelry, photographs of strangers, your father's unfinished novels. Like magical thinking, this pretense that you have some gift to keep things alive. You don't remember what you thought you would say to Sal about what you read, but then you didn't have to.
Thank you, Nina. And thank you for delivering that much needed, like, cathartic oomph we all gave at the end there. That was great. Everyone kind of let out together. So thanks for bringing that about. I'm going to introduce our next reader, but I also want to point out that Nina made a really helpful, inexhaustive narrative medicine resource list that you can take a copy of here at the corner of the table. I've got a stack of them, and we can make copies too if we run out. But lists a bunch of great titles that relate to this topic and are further reading. So once you've read Where It Hurts and once you've read The Healing Muse, you can check out some other titles on this list. So I really appreciate you doing that for us. Next up, we are going to hear from Deirdre Neilen. Deirdre Neilen is Associate Professor of Bioethics and Humanities at SUNY Upstate Medical University and Editor-in-Chief of the Healing Muse, Upstate Journal of Literary and Visual Arts. She teaches a medical creative writing elective for fourth-year medical students and offers a writing workshop for medical alumni during the annual alumni weekend. Her own creative work includes short stories and essays in academic medicine, the Examined Life Journal, Narrative Inquiry in Bioethics, New Letters, and Northeast Magazine, among others. Her great joy comes from discovering new writers for the Muse and fostering the connection between reflective practice and medicine. Let's give Deirdre a round of applause.
Thank you, Tyler. It's great to be here and see so many people coming to celebrate writing. I'm very lucky that I work at a medical institution that does believe in writing and actually puts some of these essays and stories and poems in the curriculum for certain medical students. So that's a good thing. We were talking earlier, Nina and Anais and I, about is medicine changing? And I guess we're going to get into that, and it doesn't change fast enough, but there are pockets of physicians and nurses and therapists who do believe that writing is a way for them to reflect on the people that they are attempting to help. So this first piece that I'd like to read from this issue of the Muse is from a British poet who wrote to us. Her name is Janina Asa Karpinska, and she wrote a poem called Renaissance, and it touched me deeply. It's about the generations and how when your parents get older and you have to begin taking care of them. It's very short, but I find it very beautiful. Renaissance. And then I was dressing her, mother, who needed me to wash and steady her, for whom I cut up food, spooned more firmly when refused, as it sometimes was. As I waited out a tantrum about her having to wash, which made us both laugh, it was so absurd, but brought us closer together than at any time before, and in some way made up for children I never had or would ever have. At last, this taste of what we both had missed, savored, each by the other, as with coaxing reproach and willful surrender, we turned the tide of a lifetime's chore into something we could both enjoy, not endure. Really nice. The second piece I'd like to read is an excerpt from a short essay we got that I would like our psychiatry department to include when they are teaching their residents. This writer is named Jean Kay, and she comes from rural Ohio, is how she defined herself. And it's a piece about her psychiatric confinement, and I'm just going to read the opening page. It's called Go On. I wanted to tell them stories, but I had met people of their profession before, and never ever had they wanted to hear an actual story. A story to them was merely the fog through which to pluck data, onset, symptoms, antecedents, triggers. The times I had attempted to offer one anyway, I had been left with a feeling of violation. I had trusted them with my personhood, and they hadn't reflected it back to me. It just laid on the floor between us, desolate. So, what do you have to tell us, Ms. Kay? I contemplated the medical armada facing me. The firing squad consists of one psychiatrist, one nurse, 2 interns, 1 resident. The psychiatrist in her late 30s, white, thin, with impeccable hair, a Cartier watch peeking out of the sleeve of her white coat, the picture of a perfect functionality and self-management. I wondered if she'd ever had a day when taking a shower felt unsurmountable. I wondered if she'd ever felt shame. What do you want to know? Anything you want to tell us? The psychiatrist glanced at the interns and gave a short nod in their direction. This is how it's done with us, modern liberal doctors. It's true. In another time, or in this time but in another place, treatment could be inflicted without preliminary questions. But I don't believe her. The protocol may have changed, but the premise hasn't. That mental illness has stripped me of the right to be my own storyteller. That they, firmly on the side of sanity and health, will always know me better than I know myself. I can do their work for them. I know how to translate myself, how to turn my stories into the data points they value. I'm good at it. Truthful, but in control. I'm a good patient. Well, I'm bipolar. They say you shouldn't say you are bipolar. You should say you have bipolar. But if I can't not have it, isn't it something that I am? Type 2. It's the depression that ruins. It's the depressions that ruin my life, not the mania. Though some psychiatrists believe bipolar 2s are just as waiting to happen, that we are always on the brink of madness. They dispense antidepressants cautiously. We wouldn't want us to start feeling too good. Every mood becomes suspicious, potentially dangerous. What emotions can we trust? I don't know either. I had my first depression when I was 15. It all started with the names of the stars. That was about a year after my mother killed herself in a river. She drowned in a river. It took 3 weeks for her body to be found. She wasn't bipolar, but she had depression and other comorbid conditions. But her sister was bipolar and killed herself too. So did their grandfather and possibly their brother, though there's some debate about whether the overdose was voluntary. I see you taking notes quicker. You guys love the heredity stuff. It makes it easier for you. Incontrovertible, biological, materially tangible. For us, the patients, it's like learning the oracle in Delphi made a prophecy at our birth. It closes off the odds. It undercuts hope. Anyway, in the past 10 years, I've had, 16 depressions. I made a graph. I scotch taped A4 sheets together. I noted the dates and joined the dots. It made a sinusoid curve like alternative current, a python, a mountain range. The early ones, I understood they were depressions. Afterwards, when I was a teenager, I didn't know I had depression. I thought it was just how life felt. They say depression lies, that real life is the life you live outside of depression, the crest of the wave. But how do we know it's not the opposite? Why would the respite not be the anomaly? When were you officially diagnosed? The psychiatrist interrupts. The observers have been scribbling with a certain frenzy, but she's remained impassive, and her tone is detached, matter of fact. Well, it took me some time to realize I was bipolar because the cycles are long enough to let you really sink into them. So it just becomes, your reality. It's like the joke about the two young fish that cross paths with the older fish who asks them, "How's the water?" And after he's gone, one asks the other, "What's water?" I look around, not one smile. Maybe they'd already heard it. I'll stop there.
Wow.
It's a good one, right? And for the last one, we actually have the poet who's here. So after I read this, I'll ask her to just wave her hand and you can see this. She's a wonderful poet who keeps the muse filled with good stuff. And this is a poem of hers called Lanterns. This is by Pam Freeman, who's from Skinny Atlas, New York. And she has like 2 epigrams. This poem was inspired by a book that was written by a hospice doctor about the very frequent phenomenon of patients nearing death, lucid, with cognition intact, who reported vivid encounters with deceased loved ones. And here's the poem, Lanterns, and here's the epigram. It is in the end-of-life experiences of the dying that one can often recognize the purest expression of love. They begin to see not with their eyes, but with their unlocked souls. Christopher Kerr. One by one in this quiet room, the returners join our bedside vigil. Unseen by us, long dead themselves, entering through a door we somehow missed, near as touch, distant as dream. Greeted now by the dying as if they'd scarcely been away, cherished for long ago laughter, refuge, tenderness, the simplest of enchantments. A cousin, we are told, points to suitcases. A grandmother smiles by the window. A childhood pony awaits its rider. An uncle lost in war is now a wayfinder. Frail arms cradled to her chest, the dying croons a lullaby to the stillborn child she baptized herself. Of the generation who kept her secret, she is nearly the last. Some returners bring forgiveness. Others ask it, bearing scars to match those they inflicted. Like a tattered passport, The dying heart tours landmarks where soul answers soul. They glow, the returners, familiar and soft as early evening lanterns, coming to meet and gather up the light of the dying, whose truest memories are of love. Love given, received, love wounded, silent, love grateful, abiding, love bold, bending, unending. The sum and signature of the dying, a lifetime's love, traveling from here by lantern light. Pam, stand up.
Thank you, Deirdre and Pam. Thank you for that. Next, we are going to hear from Trisha Paul. Trisha is a pediatric oncologist and palliative care physician, a narrative medicine scholar, and a writer at the University of Rochester Medical Center. She holds an MFA in creative nonfiction from New York University, and her work has appeared in anthologies and medical journals such as JAMA. She is a field notes editor for Intima, a journal of narrative medicine, and her essay, Stroppy Sevens, was nominated for a Pushcart Prize. Paul loves caring for her little free library, dancing barefoot, and collecting anything made of cork. She lives in Rochester, New York with her family. Welcome, Trisha.
Thank you, Tyler, and thanks to Writers and Books for having us.
Yeah, perfect.
So I first learned about Intima, a journal of narrative medicine, as a college student who was studying pre-med and majoring in English, and I was drawn to the field of narrative medicine. Over the past 9 years, I've had the honor of being a part of Intima as an editor for the Field Notes section. The Field Notes section is unique in that it includes firsthand accounts by patients and caregivers and clinicians that really capture moments of change. And over the past 9 years, as I've been reading the Field Notes, I've found being an editor to be a really life-giving experience throughout my medical training. Today, I will be sharing with you my piece, Stroppy Sevens, which is a Field Notes in our book. And I'll just add that where it hurts, it's been such a joy to encounter this book and be able to revisit and print all these Field Notes pieces that I've read over the years. And just, it's an honor to be able to share with you the last story of our anthology. Stroppy Sevens. What do you want? Your leery question greets me every morning without fail. I'm just saying hi, I say calmly, as I do every day. Your gaze quickly returns to the TV screen. From across the room, I watch you for a moment. There you are, comfortable in your near nakedness, nothing on but a diaper. As you sit cross-legged, your shoulders slouch forward, your face inches from the screen. With your head craned upward, your dark eyes peer out from underneath your disheveled black hair, fixed keenly on the TV. Feral. Never before have I heard such an ugly word describe a child so young. They warned me about you, how you crawl on tables, hissing and growling, choking yourself when things don't go your way. Don't let him get too close, they said, for you have discovered the pain that pinching above the elbow elicits. You are the child who scares me. Nevertheless, today is different. As I wait expectantly for your mundane greeting and brief glance, your dark eyes instead hold my gaze. Your legs unfold from under you, and you hop out of the chair. You're walking straight at me. You waddle, shifting the weight of your pudgy body from one leg to the next. Right, left, back and forth you go, your pace quickening as you move toward me. There's mischief in your dry, chapped lips, your crooked baby teeth peering out from a lopsided smile. Or is that a glimmer of a snarl? You are getting closer. I find my body inching away from your approach, taking one step backward. I try to steady myself, channeling all the confidence that I do not have to stand up straight, although my shoulders creep up unapologetically. My heart roars. My mind darts in an attempt to escape the fear that I feel throughout my entire body. I brace myself for what is to come, feeling my core tighten. Unsure, I am immobilized by uncertainty. And there I stand as you hug me. And there I stand as you hug me, your arms wrapping tightly around my middle. You're so skinny, you say to me. I stand there within your embrace, mesmerized by this moment. My eyes are wet, my mouth dry. My knees unbuckle as my muscles relax, my heart softening. My mind wanders, wondering how such a sweet boy can be turned into such a troubled soul. Troubled by my own instincts, my own repulsion, my own wariness of you who are no more than 7 years old. Slowly, one before the other, I wrap my arms around you and sigh. Thank you.
Thank you, Trisha. Last of our readings tonight, we're going to hear from Anais Salibian. Anais is getting ready to teach a class here at Writers and Books this Thursday. The class begins. We have 1 seat left, so if anyone wants to join, let me know before you leave. The class is called Craft and Cure, How Writing Helps Heal Trauma. It's a subject that Anais has been writing about for a really long time and has taught about here at Writers and Books and all over for I think well over a decade now. You've been teaching on this subject for a long time, so we're really glad to bring Anais back for that class. For many decades, Anais Salibian has conducted a private practice in mind-body healing modality and teaching internationally. And she has taught creative nonfiction writing classes. Her 2 areas of expertise merged when she developed the Writing to Heal classes, which emphasize how craft elements address the damage done to the nervous system by stress and trauma. In 2004, she received Writers and Books Teacher of Adults Award for the creation and appreciation of literature. Her current website, penaspathway.com, provides information about her writing and her courses in Writing to Heal. She has business cards over there for Pen as Pathway if you're interested in learning more. Though she's teaching this class here at Writers and Books coming up on Thursday. It's a 6-week class. She also has an audio version of that class that you can get through her website, so you can kind of take a asynchronous approach to that writing opportunity. So definitely check that out, and let's welcome Anais to the mic.
Thank you, Tyler. Is this okay?
Yeah.
Around 20 years ago, I was teaching memoir here at Writers and Books when a realization struck me. I was teaching the very elements of writing that Dr. James Pennebaker named as the writing that healed. In the early 80s, he had begun a series of experiments that demonstrated that writing can produce measurable biological benefits. At the same time, I had a thriving private practice in therapeutic bodywork. I had studied the neurobiology of trauma and taught it to my clients to clarify that symptoms weren't their fault and that healing requires physiological repair. Of course, I read The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. He wrote, "A sudden and passively endured trauma is relived repeatedly until a person learns to remember simultaneously the affect and cognition associated with the trauma through access to language." This was happening on the bodywork table, but it also exactly describes what went on in Dr. Pennebaker's experiments. He had invited subjects to write about the worst thing that ever happened to them. He divided them into groups. One group wrote only about what happened, another about how they felt about it. A third group wrote both what happened and how they felt about it. A control group wrote about neutral topics. He did surveys and measurements both before and after the 4 days of writing for 20 minutes a day. Only one of those groups experienced physical and mental health improvements, plus better outcomes at school or work. Those who wrote both the event and their responses to it. Their stress markers decreased. The number of lymphocytes in their immune systems increased, sometimes for long as months afterwards. The results were so startling that it got other scientists to do similar research on various populations: cancer patients, arthritis sufferers, Holocaust survivors, and so on. That one writing group always came up improved. It shouldn't have been news to me, but I was nevertheless blown away when one researcher decided to make a small lesion on a participant's arms just to measure how fast it would heal in the different writing groups. Sure enough, writing can help you heal physical wounds. Why does this work? Maybe it seemed miraculous to me because I grew up being taught that the brain and the nervous system were fixed. When I learned about neuroplasticity, I couldn't stop doing a happy dance. Neuroplasticity is the knowledge that the nervous system is formed by experience, which can either damage or repair it. Let me repeat, healing happens through experience, not just understanding. Trauma separates you from yourself. You end up with dissociation, dysfunction, and disease because trauma literally severs the neural nets that connect conscious and embodied self-awareness. Writing is a crucible that requires the experience of bringing both to the blank page. When you write, you're reintegrating these neural nets and helping restore homeostasis. My favorite trauma-informed writing teacher, Marian Misropian McCurdy, writes, "Self-awareness and integration are the byproducts of the process of producing effective writing." Healing from trauma involves progressive stages that need different writing approaches. I like to match writing prompts and skills with the damage that they can address. Some are tools for self-regulation. Structured exercises provide containment and therefore safety. A sequence of sentence stems can provide a blueprint for how to move forward. What can we do when we're confronted by our own freeze response, which we often experience as being stuck? My approach is that this resistant part of us knows things we don't, like what actually happened or what we need to now to move forward. There's a writing tool for that. A dialogue between you and this part can help you get free of old patterns. Dialogues with other inner parts, especially inner wisdom, are profound ways to reunite with yourself. During a traumatic event, two kinds of damage affect memory. First, the speech center in your brain shuts down. Then the part of your brain responsible for encoding memories in space and time, the hippocampus, gets damaged and can't form a normal memory like the ones you can choose to recall and talk about. Without a functioning hippocampus, events land in your body and become implicit memories that get expressed through sensations, images, gestures, and so on. The good news is that the hippocampus can grow back, but it requires what Dr. Pennebaker's subjects did. Those who experienced healing created a coherent story with a beginning, a middle, and an end out of what was once chaotic material. In teaching the craft of memoir, I found that students have to work hard to understand that a story is not simply a series of random events, but events told in scenes that have a causal relationship, which yields meaning, which trauma has taken away. I also discovered that telling the same story 5 times, each in a different narrative mode, You know, description, action, dialogue, inner thoughts, reflection, can yield insights that are essential to integration. Creating stories forces us to connect the dots between what happened, how we responded, and what were the subsequent consequences in our feelings, behaviors, and worldview. Otherwise, we're at the mercy of chaos and overwhelm. During trauma, not only does your hippocampus shrink, but your amygdala can grow. This is the alarm center in your brain, and it has a direct nerve link to your diaphragm. When we live with a tense diaphragm, we are constantly telling our amygdala to watch out, and it complies. It looks around for danger and finds it, whether it actually exists or not. What interrupts this feedback loop? Words. Telling the truth. Naming your actual experience is a way of attaining self-regulation. When you say the truth, even a painful or difficult one, the diaphragm can relax. Then your nervous system can move to its more restful repair state. Narratives are composed of scenes. When you write a scene, you have to take the old advice to show instead of tell. Show means relying on grounded observation. Pennebaker noticed that those who used more concrete words versus abstract ones got better results. When I teach my students how to write a scene, I am teaching them what I call bodyfulness instead of mindfulness. Writing prompts invite them to notice not only the 5 senses, exteroception, but proprioception and interoception, everything they can notice about their experience when they're not dissociated. When there is a danger that plunging headlong into a trauma story can overwhelm or re-traumatize the writer, other aspects of craft can help. For instance, you can change the point of view, switching from I to she or you, as you heard tonight in a couple of the readings. Or experiment with narrative distance. It helps to become aware, as the entries in Where It Hurts demonstrate, that there's a difference between the character in the story, a version of themselves, and the writer of the story, the author's self. The author has agency that the character did not. The author creates something beautiful and meaningful out of Where It Hurts.
What a fitting way to end our readings. Thank you, Anais. That was beautiful. Something you wrote for this event. I appreciate that. That was great. Awesome. So I'm going to just move this out of the way so that we can start our discussion, see each other a little bit better. And Nina's going to lead us by asking some questions of our panel, and then we'll probably have some time for audience questions.
What is our time frame right now?
We are just at 2 o'clock, or sorry, just at 3 o'clock. So yeah, we've got a good bit of time. So yeah.
So we'll do a little kind of panel discussion, and then we'd like to open it up to the audience.
Sure. Yeah, and if everyone could just do their best to, I'm not sure whose alarm that is, but if someone can turn that off, that'd be great. If everyone could just try to speak as loud as possible. If need be, we can use the mic, but it might just be hard juggling it around. So
What's this?
this is the mic for the Zoom, so they can hear us.
Okay, so I wanted to kind of start out with this questioning, like, what is narrative medicine? And as it's defined by Rita Sharon, or Sharon, I guess she pronounces it, she's considered the founder of the genre. And she says it fortifies clinical practice when the narrative competence to recognize, absorb, metabolize, interpret, and be moved by the stories of illness. So I'm throwing that out to the panel. What would you want to add to this, and why has this genre grown so? So just jump in.
What is the first one? Told you I need glasses.
So it's what is narrative medicine and why has the genre grown so? And what would you want to add to Rita Sharon's description of it? Since we have all you experts here.
I can jump in. To put it simply, I agree with and love Dr. Sharon's definition of narrative medicine. I think my way of putting it simply is that narrative medicine is an attention to the stories of patients, families, and the clinicians who care for them. I think there's a growth about narrative medicine over the past several decades because there's a desire to humanize the healthcare experiences for patients, for families, and for the people who are caring for them.
Great. Thanks, Trish. Any other thoughts on that?
I think maybe it has expanded somewhat beyond just, it ended with this description of stories of illness. And my thinking about that is, the kind of like origins of narrative medicine, we're very much focused on sort of the patients' and families' experiences, often in a way where like practitioners would be trying to kind of imagine their way into that, which we could talk about a lot, I think, the ethics of that and the power dynamics and stuff. But I think increasingly there's also a focus on clinicians' experiences of the work that they're doing and what it is to care for people, in kind of like a self-reflective and like meta-narrative sort of way, that, isn't always so much about like the ill person in front of me, but my experience as a clinician. And I think that that's part of what has been so kind of what's driven the increase in interest in narrative medicine. So I teach medical students. Often I'm teaching them as they're entering their clinical rotations for the first time. And I teach an ethics class, but we spend the first 15 to 20 minutes of every class session just talking about what's happened for them in their clinical rotations over the last couple of weeks. Because it's like the only time and place that they have to reflect on some pretty often like very intense, traumatic, or not necessarily traumatic, but just meaningful and profound experiences that they've had learning to practice medicine for the first time. And I think there are not enough outlets for learners and practitioners to do that kind of work, and narrative medicine has been a place that people are turning to be able to practice that through writing. So that's what I would add.
And Deirdre, I had a question that I wanted to send over to you. How do these journals, such as the Healing Muse, of which you are the editor, and by the way, happy 25th birthday to you guys.
And Deirdre's a founder.
The founder. And then also the Intima Bellevue Literary Review is another one of my favorites. How do you think that this has promoted healing for those working in healthcare? And how has that changed over the 25 years that you have been part of this movement or, genre?
I think it's been astounding to see over the 25 years how many more medical universities have embraced this idea of having something within their curriculum to allow their students to be published. There's nothing like being published. I mean, it's a rush to be up here and getting to talk to you. And all of you who are studying with the people here, you'll have your chance to be up here, and you'll agree, if you haven't done it already, that it feels wonderful to read something that you've written and hear the audience go, okay, it's better than money. And so physicians have discovered that there's an audience out there hungry to hear from them as real feeling people, because so often they come into the room and you have your clipboard or your whatever, and you're very because there's 10 other, 12 other patients waiting for you. That dynamic sometimes doesn't happen where the person feels seen and heard, and that when you left that room, you really thought about what they told you. And I do think that many physicians and nurses are thinking about us, but I think, as Liz just said, there's no place for them to really talk about that. They got to get to the next room. They see people die in front of them for the first time in their lives, and you move to the next room. They see a baby be born for the first time in their lives, and they move to the next room, where they hear, this is how we give a cancer diagnosis. This is how I call the family whose person is dying. I mean, these are amazing things that our students learn. And I think it's been wonderful that narrative medicine has started to say, so what did that feel like? Reflect. There's nothing like reflecting. I mean, we all have a visceral reaction to something, but that's not usually the most important one. The most important reaction is after you let that sit with you for a while, you write it out, something changes. I mean, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good, but I think what narrative medicine is doing that I've seen over these 25 years is more physicians and more nurses are saying, would you read this? And what do you think about this? And we often hope that they're reading it to their patients. I mean, there's a wonderful physician in New York City, Dr. Ofri, and her books, she makes herself a partner with the patient to say, this story you're telling me is fascinating. Can we work it up together? And she finds that many of her patients want to, and she gives them full credit under her, with her, as a byline. And I think that's, all positive to take away the veil. When we started medicine, they were told to have detached concern. So think about that term, detached concern. It's an oxymoron in a sense, but the students were taught, if you don't have that, you won't survive. You can't go in these rooms and care. You'll be nothing. You'll be a dish rag, okay? Well, okay, I don't want a doctor who's a dish rag, but neither do I want one that just sort of has detached concern and moves to the next one. So I think it's very positive, narrative medicine.
And I was going to ask Liz kind of the same question, but you already answered it when you answered the last question. So I want to throw this over to Sandra, because we're talking about the experience from both the receiver of care and the provider of care. And with Sandra's role at Trillium, I was thinking maybe you could talk a little bit about how writing helps your mental health, and how does it affect the work you do at Trillium as a care coordinator?
Well, for me, writing is therapeutic. It gets out my feelings. It gets out my thoughts. It gets out my frustration, my angers, my emotions. And it helps me to be able to help those that I'm serving, because my life experiences, as I have somewhat shared with you, has enabled me to care for those who are still on that journey of addiction and homelessness and needing medical care and don't want to come in and get it. It makes me able to reach out and understand the people I'm working with, the clients. So writing for me, I was writing when I was a teenager and going through depression, which I didn't know I was in depression. But it was my release. It helped me, it keeps me grounded. It keeps me able to do the work that I do with care and concern. never learned about disassociating concern or whatever you call it. I'm a natural caregiver. I'm a helper of mankind. So I give, and sometimes I give to the point that I do need to write about my feelings and journalize so that I'll be able to replenish myself, that I can continue on the next day.
Does everybody know what Trillium is? I just realized I was saying it as though everybody knows what it is. Let me just give it a little kind of.
Trillium Health is a healthcare center, just like Wilson, Anthony Jordan. We have doctors, nurses, practitioners, care managers. They take care of people who are all types of people. You know, I'm also a patient of Trillium Health. I'm going to share something with you that I have not shared publicly at any time except within Trillium. I'm HIV positive, but I'm positive about being positive because I have survived this thing for 40 years. So that's what I do. I go and help those who can't help themselves. You know, I've been blessed to be a survivor of many things. And I think that that's my purpose, to be there to help those who can't help themselves until they're able to help themselves. So, yeah, I'm publicly coming out that I'm HIV positive, which I want to write my book one day.
Yes.
About it, about my life and things I've done and survived, and let other people know they too can survive, whether it's mental illness, whether it's addiction, incarceration, abuse, whatever. You can be positive about being positive, whatever's going on in your life. You know, is you gotta be happy no matter what you're going through. You know, it's a choice, and I choose to be happy.
I'm just going to add to that. I was really fortunate to have been able to take Tyler Barton's workshop in doing legacy workshops for all sorts of people who want to write about their lives, which includes writing about illness, writing about happiness, wellness, whatever's been going on in your life. And while I'm sitting there with Tyler, I'm like, wow, like there's groups of people that have lived through these amazing things. So I contacted Rich Fowler, if you would just raise your hand, Rich, and he's a coordinator for care at Trillium
And my mentor.
and Sandra's mentor. Then I said, could I come and do a 6-week workshop of legacy writing for long-term survivors? And he said, what'd you say? He said, yeah. Yeah, let's do that.
Please do.
So that's how I got to know Sandra, and it was a wonderful experience to be able to work with people who had these stories to tell. So, you know, and then Sandra said she would come here today. So thank you so much.
Yeah. By the way, I'm 67, and I've had this longer than I have been here, almost. Over half of my lifetime have been with this condition, but it has not defined me. It's something I live with, and I allow it to live with me because we can't divorce each other. So I'm married to it, but I'm happily married to it because the care of Trillium Health is exceptional. I've been having care there for over 30 years, and their care and their concern and their love and their kindness helps keep me alive and positive about being positive.
Thanks. So I had a question that I wanted to direct to Trisha. And what are some ways that modern day clinician education encourages attention to the patient narrative? And how can that attention affect the way that clinicians care for patients and their families, their colleagues, and themselves. Trisha was on Connections on Wednesday as part of the panel that talked about the healing journey, which was the film that we saw last night here. And so I heard Trisha start to talk about community, and I was about the community that happens when people are writing together about a situation. And there wasn't time for her to really elaborate. So I've asked you 3 questions, but
I'll see what I can do.
Whatever you want to do with it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'll start by saying that I think with the growing interest in narrative medicine, medical education has also prioritized a focus on narrative medicine and the health humanities, and thinking about how we can use an attention to narrative to inform our clinical skills and to have more curiosity and ask more open questions to our patients in exam rooms, as well as to try to separate our encounters with patients from kind of the agenda and the prescribed questions that we need to ask to provide care. And so I think that medical education is trying to really encourage storytelling and story sharing within how we're listening to patients and caring for them. I think that to talk a little bit about community, I think it's been nice to be in medicine at this time when there are more and more people in this field who are interested in narrative and thinking about the stories that patients are sharing with us, and also thinking about the stories that we can share with each other and how that can help us work together in caring for patients.
Thank you. And this is directed to Deirdre and Liz. This is the question I often get when I'm talking with students about narrative medicine or writing their stories about patient care. And I myself have had some very challenging experiences with writing about patient care, which is a whole other thing. So for you two as editors, what are the ethics of writing about patients, and any advice from yourselves as editors? What do you look for, and what would you not publish? Do we have 3 hours?
Yeah, okay, I'll start. That's a very tricky question. I mean, on the surface, you are not allowed to publish something about somebody else without their permission, and especially in a power dynamic of you are the clinician and this is the patient. You starting to write the patient's story is unethical. So it starts with a masking. When physicians used to write up a case study and present it, they would, use an initial. M was 47-year-old, and then you identify whatever condition that they might have. But if you were going to publish that, they wanted you to change as many parts of that identity as possible, so that if I were M and I happened to be reading the medical journal, I should not know that that was me, because doctors in the past did not have to ask me, would I like to be in a case study? And over the years, people are reading more medical journals, and they don't like it if they see something about themselves that they were not asked. So, but I say that it's tricky because we don't know when somebody sends us their short story or their poem, and they are a physician or they are a nurse or they're in the healthcare field, and they're writing about this. Our journal clearly states you must make anonymous all the details and the names, and that's what we want. But we don't have at least AI hasn't turned into that yet. I mean, maybe that's going to become one of the things AI will do for us. We don't know. I mean, there's no way that I can look that up. I could call that physician and say, would you give me your patient's name and number? And they won't, because obviously that's privileged. Everything is confidential. So I can't guarantee you that we haven't published something that we shouldn't have. Although I like to think that our people do read the rules and Have we ever had a conversation where we thought, oh, this is too real? Or...
I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, it's tough to know, and I don't think we want to be in the business of like policing, you know, HIPAA as literary journal editors. I think in the conversations that we've had, reading submissions, it tends to be more, you know, less about the details of like, is this an identifiable story, and more like what is the kind of perspective being taken here, and what is the ethos of that perspective, which, you know, again, it's hard to like know for sure without having the author there in the room with you, but just to kind of go back again to the concept of narrative medicine and a little bit of its history, there have been debates over the years about like the concept of empathy and whether you know, encouraging medical providers to write from the perspective of patients might improve their empathy for patients, and that would be a good thing purportedly for healthcare. And then there were some kind of critiques of that idea, which have to do with the fact that, you know, if you're outside of someone's experience, it's hard to tell whether you're empathizing or just kind of projecting, right? And I think as readers, that's kind of what we're trying to like suss out a lot of the time, right? Like, does this seem like this is somebody like projecting feelings onto their patient, and you know, taking someone else's experience and making it meaningful in a way that's useful to them, or is it more like I was saying earlier about kind of the their own experience of caregiving rather than trying to like inhabit someone else's interiority? I think that's kind of how we think about that, but it is hard, and it's hard to generalize about it too.
I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, that's a big question. Yes, you did very, very well. I do want to just add that in the submissions portion of the intima, like say somebody here wanted to write something about an experience that you had with you know, a provider, or, you know, your feelings about being a caregiver, or and you wanted to go to one of the journals. The Intima on their submission page has what they have a list of like 18 protected 18 points of protected health information that you can, that I found was very, very helpful. And on the list of resources, I've put that on there. So if you feel like you do want to write something and submit it, that will help you understand what you know, what is protected information and what isn't. Obviously, you can write about yourself, but it's a little bit harder when you're trying to write about people that you know. So it was that was very good. Thank you. And then I had a question for Anais, who has already answered everything. Is there anything else that you would want to add about just that question of neuroplasticity and how it gets manipulated and changed over the course of storytelling, or any example that you would want to share with us before we move on and open this up?
I guess what I want to say is that my understanding, and I think, and I've grown with what research has developed over the last decades, is that trauma isn't the event that happened to you, it's how your nervous system responded to it that may cause you to have symptoms. And also the idea that trauma is related to disease, that there's a connection between, you know, there's a huge early childhood adverse experiences studies that shows childhood trauma gives you, I don't know, 329% more likely to get some kind of lung disease, or, so it's the ways in which you can repair your nervous system that not only helps you recover from the trauma response that stays in your body if you haven't processed it, but also, it's the same nervous system that is designed to maintain homeostasis. So if you can't maintain homeostasis, you can't have health. And so everything is entwined like this. It's not separate. I don't think emotional health and physical health are separate.
And so the storytelling
The
is
storytelling
a
is an integrating experience. You're using the, let's say you have embodied awareness here and conscious awareness here, and they're separate because of trauma. You really have to bring those neural nets together in the same time and space so they can actually touch each other and regrow. And they regrow. They grow. You regrow neurons. You regrow axons. So the communications between. You regrow the right kind of receptors on your nerve cells and change the neurotransmitters that are going to them, all because you're having the experience of putting together all those elements of your story, your experience of it, your response to it in a concrete way. I mean, the experimenters found that if you're just talking in your head and writing 20 pages, it's not going to heal anything. If you're writing about something that's already resolved, it's not going to heal anything. So,
thank you. Can we get a time check?
Yeah, I think it might be a good time to transition to some audience questions.
Yeah.
I actually wanted to start with a question for you, Naya, if you don't mind. I'm curious about when you're teaching your legacy writing workshop with folks at Trillium. I'm wondering, what have you learned from that experience, either as a writer or, in your own healing? And also, if there's any really great exercises that you do that are kind of a good place for people to start if they're looking for an accessible way of getting started with writing their narratives, or medical narratives.
So thank you. That's a great question. Specific to Trillium, and I'm wondering if maybe some of the audience can kind of join in, because there's some people that participated in the class. I went in, and that's kind of thanks to you. I went in with a clear curriculum. Mm-hmm. And join in too and help me with this. So I went in with a clear curriculum. I had each week, the goal for each week set out, because I wasn't sure who was going to be participating. If people had done writing before, I had no idea who was going to be in the class. And so I felt like having a clear framework was going to be very, very helpful. And also, people could have been anxious. They could have been told by by somebody to come, or they saw the ad, posted in the hallway, and they decided to show up to do this thing. But, I didn't know what I would be, kind of walking into, and I wanted to make it a safe and comfortable environment, first and foremost. So we had a very specific curriculum. I did examples for each week of, if we were going to do a list poem, or if we were going to write our obituaries, or if we were going to write a letter to somebody, and all these different tasks. I would have something that I would share first to kind of frame the workshop. I told people that it was a good idea to journal, and I'll share that with. I think it's a good idea to journal, regardless if you're a healthcare professional and you're thinking about doing some writing. Keep a journal for yourself, just of your everyday situations, and the sadnesses that come out of what you do, or the joys that come out of what you do. And don't think anything about it. This is only for your eyes only. And take notes on what's going on. Take notes, like in my piece that I just read, I really did walk out into the sunset after a day of hearing and seeing and being a part of so many different difficult things, that I would be breathless, and I would sit in the car, and sometimes I just take little notes. And that's how this piece came out. I took little notes about this particular situation and saved it for years, and then wrote about it when I had all that junk to try to figure out what to do with. So journal, and also read a lot about what other people have written about their experiences. And in terms of Trillium specifically, I don't know if you have something that, what was something that worked for you in that class?
What made it easy for me to write with Nina is the topics. It was, the topics about the obituary, the topic about the letter. I was out that day, so I didn't get to do my letter, but I have a 48-year-old son that I'm going to write a letter to. That's who I want to write my letter to. So that made her topics made it easier for me to write and get out what I was feeling inside, because it just opened me up to be able to think and process what was going on within me, that I needed to say something about, like the obituary. That piece came from her workshop, and it made it easy for me to say what I had to say. And before I met Nina, I wanted to write a book about my life. So doing it the way she, doing it in topics like she gave me, making it easier for me to write stuff. So it was very helpful to me and to others, because I learned things about others, and they learned things about themselves that they was able to bring out and share, or not share, but was able to put on pen and paper, and it was very a great experience.
Any other questions from the audience?
I have one.
Let's start here.
I'm curious to know, first of all, it's notable to me that all of you are women. Just wanted to bring that up.
Women's History Month.
Yeah, I've had a lot of male providers, and I have a lot of personal medical trauma and familial medical trauma. I'm curious how many physicians are open to hearing patient narratives, because I sometimes wonder, when I look back at my experiences, and I am taking your class, Anais, I'm very excited about that actually. I don't feel there's a two-way feedback system in terms of being willing to hear what physicians' actions have inflicted on human bodies and human psyches. And I've seen that in my own experiences medically, but particularly in my children, both of whom have chronic diseases, one of which is quite rare. And so I'm curious from this perspective, if there's a generational gap, right? Like, we hear Gen Z is coming into the workplace now. Are they more open to this? But what is the feedback system through which clinicians don't just talk to each other about their patients, but they hear patients talking about them?
I feel fortunate as a psychiatric nurse practitioner that my work is almost like 90% about narrative and feedback and interaction. And, there is that 10% like, let's talk about the meds, but that's such a small piece of it. As a patient,
Right.
I have had, that same kind of difficulty making myself heard. And then I have to stand up, really, my whole 5'1.5" and say, look, I'm also a provider. So
and when you're not,
and when you're not,
they don't hear it.
Yeah, and that gives them a little bit. Sometimes I say my best friend, can't believe I'm sitting here. My best friend is a lawyer, so I mean I pull, sometimes we just have to pull in the big guns, and I always think, what are happening to people who don't have what
right.
I have? So that's a great question, Amy.
Gen Z does give me hope. As like we teach them, and it's not to say that every one of our students is excited about the idea of doing this kind of listening and reflective work, but I have been pleasantly surprised at the reception of some of the teaching that we do, I have to say. But there's not nearly enough, like not even remotely enough opportunities for that kind of exchange. And like, so I am a clinical ethicist, which means I look at patient charts. I get consulted on cases when there's ethical dilemmas, and I talk to everybody involved in the case, so the team and patients and families. But before I do that, the first thing I always do is read the chart. And you know, we all have access to our own charts and we see some of that. But when I first started doing that work, I was like stunned and horrified by like the experience from the other side of reading through somebody's entire chart, and just how like completely formulaic and flattening it is, and how things follow you. Like if you had an encounter with a medical provider 10 years ago that got you labeled as aggressive, that's still in your chart 10 years later,
Or it's
right?
just anxiety. It's just anxiety.
Yeah. And so, you know, I just have the thought all the time is like, why can't patients also contribute to our charts?
Yes.
Right? Like, why is there not a place in the chart where we can provide our own history that is not just the kind of like the medical history? That seems like one really easy way that kind of exchange could start to happen. And yeah, I don't know. I think we're far from that still.
That just blew my mind. It's like, how come I never thought of that? Like, it's like, yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
Oh, how are you?
Well, let's start here in the front. Yeah.
So I think one of the issues that, and I'm seeing it both from the patient side and from the provider side and what you talk about, is that it seems like in so much of the medical profession, you don't see the whole picture. So, and there's no closure. So you don't know how this little piece of it that you have worked out, you have the luxury of working with people for a long time, but sometimes you don't even know how it worked out. So you don't get that kind of feedback that people get in other professions. And I'm thinking as I'm listening to all of you that may be one of the reasons why medical narrative is so important, because it then gives you an opportunity to really examine this little piece of it and where it fits in, and to give it some meaning. But you don't have it from the other side, which is, you know, the patient too. And I don't know how many people have read their whole medical record. It's not, I think the electronic medical records is one of the most important pieces of communication that has happened in a long time, but it's not necessarily user-friendly or easy to find what you're looking for. So anyways, that's my thought. I think it's got to be very difficult to be in a profession where you don't really get to see the whole picture. You don't know how ultimately years later your advice turned out, and whatever it is. So
I just want to say something. As a patient, I've learned to advocate for myself over the years. I've learned to ask questions and, okay, we're talking about this, but okay, let's stop talking about this. This is what I really need to talk about. And this is my body. I've been with it for 67 years, and I need you to listen to me. And that's what I also teach the people I work with, to advocate for themselves, to talk to the doctor just like they're just a regular person. I know that you're a doctor, but you're a person too, and here's where I'm at, and I need you to work with me on this, and if you're not listening to me, then maybe we need to move on to someone else.
here. Yeah, hi, my name is Kevin McHugh. I was in the class with Sandra and with Neilen, and I had a lot of experience over the last 23 years in recovery. And my recovery comes from, I also worked as a counselor. I was working in 3 different places, Creedmoor, New York City, right off the bridge there. I worked in that facility, and I also worked in Dick Van Dyke. And my own experiences, for me to journal, is very helpful to identify why some of the things I've done, why I'm doing the things that I'm doing now, and also that to be able to help somebody else from my experience is very, very helpful. And I also like to write a book. The other thing was I was involved with a 12-step program where we did a doctor's program, which was Dr. Pratt, I think, in New York City. And what we would do is we would educate different physicians when they were just coming out of school before they became doctors, how to refer them to a certain program and take them to a program and let them find out from people that are in the program exactly why it would be helpful for them to go there. So a lot of good things. And I appreciate everyone that spoke today because I could identify with a little bit of everything. Thanks.
Okay, questions, yeah.
I would like to ask a question to the whole panel. And I'm somewhat presumptuous because I have been a provider in my work working myself. And I want to encourage a different perspective. It's been touched on briefly here or there, but my understanding of narrative, and I've been grounded in narrative psychology in my clinical practice, is that it's always about the reciprocity of how human beings connect. Martin Buber talked about I am thou, and the real essence of a relationship is the transactions between the two. I think healthcare providers have been held hostage, sadly, by the medical model, which is a structural detachment mechanism. Then 30 years ago, it started to be compounded by managed care. I always find it humorous because it's about managed costs. And most of us have been recipients of that true reality. So my question is, how has your practice within the medical narrative enhanced your reciprocity in your journey in what I consider to be the art of living? I mean, it's one goal we all share in here. I have one life as far as I know, and what I am doing in my relationships, has it enhanced, the quality and the fulfillment, or has it become more and more problematic? So I would just be curious to hear folks in the panel talk about how you're embracing a medical narrative is impacting your art of living. Who brought the crickets in? or not.
I love to write. I mean, I don't know if that's what you're asking, but as you know, you and I know each other, and it's my husband. It's my husband. So I think I know what he's asking. But I love to write, and I'm so moved by phrases that my patients will say. I'm so moved. A woman talked about the horrible accident that 2 of her family members were in, and she lost both family members, and it's years later and we're still working on this. And she went to a zoo, and and at the zoo an alligator was lying in the sun and put his hand in a certain way on the rock, and she went to pieces in the zoo because that was what she had envisioned when she saw the results of this horrible accident, was
one of her family members' hands was in the same way on the shoulder of the other family member, and they had both been killed instantaneously. And she had to be taken out of the zoo, and to me, that to be part of that, the visualness of that, but to be part of that in a person's life, and it's just such an honor. And then that I can talk about it, I can write about it, is it just makes my life what it is. I don't know if that makes sense to people, but it makes a lot of sense to me. Does that answer your question?
All right, Mick, and then we'll take that one.
Thank you, Mick Krasner. I thank you all. Really inspiring discussion here on so many different subjects. As a physician, and sometimes who tries to write some narratives, I guess you can call them, about my own experiences, how they affected me. I'm wondering, and I don't know how to put this as this question to you all, but there's a little discussion about, you know, that you wouldn't publish something that the patients they didn't know about, etc., disclosure and issues like that, or permissions. I'm thinking about narratives that are about my own experiences and how they've affected me, but that involve stories that really center around patients. And I worry and I wonder about like ownership, like whose story isn't, and how fair is it for me to, you know, sort of advance my, say, career by publishing? Those kind of questions, and I don't think there's answers to them necessarily, but the things that I worry about and think about, and it's probably a lot of the reasons why I don't share a lot of this stuff, because I worry about that, and I don't know who really owns it. And I don't know if any of you thought about that or have comments to make about that, not just answers, but just explorations about that.
I'll go back to my mentioning Dr. Ofri in New York City, and I think her way of dealing with that is to say right out to the patient, I would like to work up this story we are doing together with your permission and with your help. And if we can get it published with your permission, I would like to do that. I think that's a great way, because then the story is a co-ownership. It's the physician working with the patient on the story, and whatever outcome happened, they publish it. I don't think that's always reasonable or realistic, but I think what you have to do, anybody who writes is co-opting somebody else's part of the experience, right? I mean, that's the hard part of writing. I used to be very arrogant about, look, I can write whatever I want to. And I got pushback from family members who said, I recognize myself in that story and I don't like myself. And I said, I don't care, write your own story. But I have learned. I mean, one of the things that we get better at as we get older, I think, we do develop empathy. And you realize that your version of it is not the only version. And so I in large part stopped writing because much of my writing was about the family. And you know, I'm the poorer for it in some ways, but in other ways it's been okay. I made my peace with that. So I don't think there's a real one answer to your question. You have to wrestle with that. But if you have a good story,
Code name substitute. That would be a quick solution.
Oh, people still know.
Oh. Those in the know will continue with their knowledge, and we have to deal with it. And what it all seems to come down to is a matter of helping a patient face the difficulties, the negativities in their situation. And deal with it and learn from the negative situation and become a different person as a result.
Thank you, John. Trisha, did you have?
I'll just briefly add that I think I ask myself that question with every piece of writing. That I think writing for one's personal processing is one thing, but for every single piece of writing that I think about sharing with anyone else. I have to ask and grapple with those questions. So it's very case by case. I'll also add that I have several stories that I've had the honor to be able to share with the patient or the parent who has been involved in the story, and they have found meaning and have expressed gratitude for me for sharing their story and for amplifying their voice and their experiences within the medical community and within the broader community.
Great. I do want to take one last question. Yeah.
So I'm just curious because we're talking about studying narrative medicine, we're talking about journals, and it's sort of more academic in some sense. Thoughts on the internet and the fact of simply people sharing stories in ways that get a lot more views than ever before. I'm just curious about your thoughts.
What we think about that?
I see it all the time.
I know. The internet is a great thing, but the fact that everybody can write anything and put it out there, I think is a terrible thing. And I think people have been hurt terribly by what they read there, and there's no, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's true or not true or whatever, and then everybody says it's true and sends it on, so I'm not a big, I stay off.
And I may, just to add as a clinician, everybody opens up, you know, I'm on the internet, you know, with my patients on telehealth, and I click on and I say, "Hi, you must be so and so," and they'll say, "Yes, I'm here because I have a friend on TikTok who told me that I need Adderall. So will you be able to prescribe me Adderall?" I'm like, thanks, Dr. TikTok. So from a very selfish clinician viewpoint, it's like. And we have to manage things differently now because they do have so much more information, and we really have to respect that people are getting sometimes excellent information, but it's so much, and it has so much interference with the relationship and the assessment that one is trying to do to tease it all out. Great question.
There are some ways that it gets back at that question about like the exchange between patient narratives and provider narratives. Like the internet does kind of facilitate that sometimes. Like I'm thinking about Deirdre and I teach this article to some of our health profession students that's an account of a patient who posted like a negative experience she had with radiology to her blog. And then the radiology clinic, somebody there found that and kind of like raised it to the attention of the leadership at the clinic. And then, you know, they got in touch with that patient and were like, you know, we want to make this right with you. And then she was kind of like creeped out and put off about the fact that they had found her blog. And then it like ultimately resulted in this like productive conversation happening between them about like, you know, what everybody's expectations of privacy or public, you know, how we navigate those things, and how I guess kind of patient interactions just do extend beyond the space of the clinic. And I mean, I guess it gets at kind of all these questions we're talking about like the messiness of narrative and whether you can ever sort of as a provider be like engaging in a patient's narrative in a way that feels like safe and responsible. I don't think so. I actually don't. I don't think that's possible. But you can like have an awareness of that fact, right? And try to sort of navigate with a sense of humility, knowing that there's no way to prevent harm. Like writing hurts people. It just does a lot of the time. And all we can try to do is limit that.
All right, well, let's all give everyone a round of applause.